All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome. You may recognize me. I'm your instructor from this section. It's so glad to have office hours with you guys. So we're excited and looking forward to some of your questions. We're in lovely Palo Alto today. It's for 3 o'clock our time and a little bit warm here. You remember me, I'm Brendan Boyle, and I'd like to introduce Will Carey. Will?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Will Carey. I'm one of the design directors here at IDEO, and it's an absolute pleasure to be live on air, broadcasting from Palo Alto.
So as a design director, Will gets to do a ton of ideation and a ton of prototyping, and one of our creative geniuses, and gets to touch many different projects. So he's great to have it as an addition to our office hours today.
Yeah, so a bit about me. I'm trained as an industrial designer. I originally worked in London, and I've been here at IDEO for over 5 years as an industrial designer and interaction designer. So I really bridged that sort of intersection between physical and digital prototyping and building, and get to work on some really exciting stuff, and some stuff we've recently worked on over the years with Brendan. And the Toy Lab's always a great place to be prototyping.
So we're looking forward to some of your questions today. And if there's anything, we'll treat this as a prototype so we can improve and make this better for the next time. But as you look at your screen, you'll see a bunch of these dots, 9 of them to be exact, up in the corner. If you click on that, you'll see a drop down that has Q&A. So in the Q&A, then you can type up some questions, send them our way. Make sure you introduce yourself in the question, your name, and then where you're tuning in from, because that'll be exciting for us, because we've got quite an international crowd. And then you could also tweet us at, let's see, we could tweet us at IDEO U. IDEO U, just IDEO U. Hashtag ideas to action. All right, a lot of information, but one of those ways, hopefully you can get us some questions and we can have a little conversation going back and forth.
Yeah, so we're live from Palo Alto. We're really excited to be here. My name is Will Carey.
And I'm Brendan Boyle. And yeah, let's get a few questions going and see what you have going.
And we're really excited to know where you're tuning in from, or watching and tweeting or asking questions from. So as you send us questions, please tell us where you're sending those questions from, because we really love our international audience.
So, well, here's a good question that popped up. Has there ever been a time when you'd recommend against iterating?
You can always iterate, but that's an interesting question, because when do you stop? When you're making prototypes, you can always iterate and make things better. It's just the perfectionist in us sometimes doesn't know when to stop. Yeah,
I'd look at the question in twofold. We would never recommend against iterating. Yeah. You need to do that because you're going to learn. Yeah. But at some point, you have to stop.
Yeah.
So what helps you and your team stop? What are some of the deciding factors?
Time.
Time
is a really can be seen as your worst enemy, or is often your best friend, because you actually just have to use that, what you can do in the time, to actually can use that as the constraint to know when to stop iterating. And when something's working, or you feel like you've kind of got that feeling that prototype is just giving you enough information, then it's oftentimes it's the right time to sort of share that.
Yeah, or looking at time, deciding, oh, I've got 24 hours left before the presentation. If I'm going to iterate again, it's going to put constraints on what level or fidelity that prototype will be, but the thinking should still be high.
Absolutely. And if you're fortunate enough to be working on a prototype that really sort of captures everything and it's just self-explanatory and it works. So if you're doing industrial design, you have a form, you sometimes have a mechanism. If you're doing, something that's more digital, you might have something on screen, and that can be very self-explanatory.
Okay. But great question.
If you can't communicate that, then that's the real important thing, to be able to communicate why you've made that prototype and what it's showing, and that's when it's good to stop.
Exactly. All right, let's jump. We've got welcome to Cam from Toronto, which is exciting. And then let's see, does Cam have a question yet, or it's just coming up? But Toronto, lovely city.
Yeah, it's nice to not be there. You've been there?
Several times.
Yeah, I should get out there.
Definitely got to get out there. All right, his question is, well, let's remind people on question and answers. Go to the top of your screen. You'll see these 9 boxes. Click that, and then down will come up a Q&A. So let's see. I think Cam's got a question.
And we've also got Karen just joining.
Oh, that's great. Did Cam have a question, or was he just saying hi?
Karen's from Argentina.
Oh, fantastic.
So we should give maybe a few more minutes for everyone from all over everywhere else to be logging in. But feel free to ask questions. We're live from Palo Alto, and we're really excited to be your host for the next 50 minutes or so.
And you can tweet us at IDEO U, hashtag ideas to action. Okay, let's jump to another question. How do you constrain the problem once you looked at an issue? You notice lots of adjoining issues. The more layers you peel, the more issues you see. How do you know when to stop and when to start and stop, or when to stop? So let's look at it. How do you constrain the problem once you look at an issue? You notice lots of adjoining issues. So you got any thoughts on that, or?
Well, it's really important just to chunk out all the little problems or issues you want to be solving and sort of chip away at those iteratively and one by one, because sometimes when you look at everything, it's kind of a little bit overwhelming. You kind of get that.
We like to surround the question with lots of little questions or adjacent questions, and then ideate on those and see what comes up.
Yeah.
Versus thinking, sometimes it'll just help redefine the question.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good way, is to spend maybe 15-minute brainstorms on adjacent issues and see if there's anything that's fruitful coming out of that, versus saying, I got to solve everything now and it's becoming too big.
Yeah. And if you're fortunate enough to have a few people on your team, you can actually just sort of divide and conquer sometimes.
Yeah.
As well.
And I think this leads really well into design thinking and this bias for action. So starting to do something will get you going, versus starting to worry about the problems getting too big.
Yeah, just getting started.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Cam asked, tips on how to break a big idea into a simple prototype. Tips on how to break a big idea into a simple prototype.
So we've got a couple of other people joining as well. Welcome to those who've just joined. So we've got Cam, Karen, people from LA.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So tips on breaking a big idea into a simple prototype. One way is we use a lot at IDEO is sometimes we'll use prototyping very rough. You've seen in the class around using foam core or cardboard, but using a skit or a video to tell the whole story. And shooting a short video can give the whole sense of the experience. You don't even have to make everything at that point. You just have to feel the experience. So I see so many people trying to solve everything and put it in a big PowerPoint, but sometimes a skit is super powerful.
Yeah, but that's really important when you do stuff like, say, a customer journey, or we've done a lot of stuff with retail, transportation, and I love the stuff that you guys did with the early prototypes for the apps you designed, where you actually pretended to be in the actual iPhone, acting out the interactions.
Yeah, that would have been a huge thing to prototype, because it would have been weeks or months of software, and we were able to do that in
5 minutes. Right?
Yeah, so when I show that to students, they sort of get it. Oh, here's a big idea. I don't even know how to program something, but I can then show that idea. So I like the use of video, and that can be for a physical, digital, or a combination, or an experience.
Yeah. And I think that the interesting thing is when you're with groups of people, getting that moment of like social awkwardness, just getting over that bump of like doing something together, and doing a quick skit can actually really break the ice.
That's great.
And what I love working with Brendan is he's always got these little tips and tricks for how to, break the ice or just get people comfortable doing rough, rapid, and right prototyping. And I don't know if you want to share any of those, but
well, let's first welcome Nora in Madrid. That's very cool.
Yeah, Madrid is.
Even she's up later early. I gotta remember my geography. So
it's getting a little late over there, I think.
Well, here's a great question. When is an example of a time when you really failed? And let's say a prototype maybe failed, or an idea's failed. In my part of the work at IDEO as a toy inventor, we have more failures than we do successes. So I get really good at that. And as you recall from the class, we try to instantly turn that failure into some kind of lesson. But I'll give a concrete example. We were working on a baseball bat. So folks familiar with sports, it was a baseball bat. And magically, when you hit the button, bubbles came out of the end. So you think of bubbles, nice bubbles that kids enjoy. And then you would swing the bat and hit the bubbles and smash it. It was called Grand Slam Bubble Bat. So we're down with a bunch of executives in a conference room, and I got the prototype, and it's been working perfectly. and I'm super excited to share it with them. And I hit the button, nothing comes out. I hit the button again, and I start swinging the bat thinking I got to prime it. And it just, no bubbles came out, just bubble solution. And it sprayed over 8 different executives.
You must have had an expensive dry cleaning.
That was a pretty big failure. Needless to say, I didn't sell the concept to them, but I did improve the mechanism, and then I was able to sell it to a different company.
Right.
So
did you get a laugh out of them?
I initially did not get a laugh out of them. I got like, what the heck's going on, or more swear words involved. But eventually, we can laugh at it now.
You definitely learn from those moments.
Yeah.
I remember when I tried to. So the question is, what is an example of a time when you've right royally failed? And I think if you're not failing, you're not really pushing. There's obviously levels of failure. Right. There's like embarrassing yourself in front of the client, which can be seen as a learning. And there's actually like just trying to build something and just it all falling apart. And I remember trying to build the cabin of an A380 aircraft. And it was just so big. I'd never built anything of that scale. And like interior.
Are you doing this out of foam core?
Yeah, out of foam. And I couldn't figure out how to like cut the foam core to be evenly like perfect, but then we had to skin it as well. So skinning, it means you use foam core as the main sort of monocoque structure, and then you can use paper. And I kept this like basically crinkling up the paper, and also it kept just falling down for ages. And we were like trying to build this whole top bit of the cabin at full scale, and that was like a really frustrating moment. But we eventually cracked it, and luckily people on the team like helped me figure that out. So actually just asking for help. But then there was that sort of embarrassing moment when your boss comes in expecting to see the cabin built, and you're like, it's not ready. Just like, it's kind of a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, I think we can both agree neither is like failing, but if you get used to it, you're gonna learn from it, and it's gonna make your things better. But on general, anyone would want to succeed all the time, but that just doesn't happen in the world of design thinking. Hey, who's joining us from Lima, Peru?
Yeah, welcome from Peru.
All right.
Ursula from Peru.
Ursula, thank you for joining. Just to remind folks, we're in Palo Alto, California, home of the Silicon Valley. Please ask us questions. There are a couple of different ways you can do it. You can go to the corner of your screen. You'll see 9 squares. Click on that, and this Q&A will drop down. So then you can type in a question. And for sure, say your name and where you're from would be great. Or you can tweet us at IDEO U, #ideas to action.
Yeah, we're really excited to be here. My name is Will Carey. I'm one of the design directors at IDEO, and I'm really delighted to be with Brendan, who's head of the Toy Lab, founder of the Toy Lab here in Palo Alto. Yeah,
and as mentioned earlier, Will gets to work on all sorts of different projects at IDEO. He's one of our design directors and an outstanding creative person, and super fun to work with. All right, so let's see. Let's see what else we have going on here as far as the question.
We've got quite a good international crowd joining.
Yeah.
Like Madrid, Peru,
Los Angeles,
Argentina. Got good coverage.
Lacey from Los Angeles. Hopefully I got that name correct. We're so excited we got such a good crowd joining us.
So the next question coming in is, where does research fit into the prototyping process, Brendan? What do you think?
Well, if you saw the first lesson, research is around gaining insights. So quickly turning those insights into either strategies or opportunities, and then creating prototypes. But then you want to use those prototypes to go back and check your research, or to confirm it, or to get new insights from it. So we use a lot of our early prototypes, we call them sacrificial prototypes, meaning we're not that invested in them, but we're invested in creating something that we're going to learn from. So that's using the research on that prototype.
And it kind of relates nicely, this idea of doing the research, building something, and then showing it to people. It relates nicely to the last question of when does a prototype, when was a time when it royally failed for me? It's like you often make so many assumptions making this prototype, and you go and show it to the person you think is going to use it in the way that you think is going to be right. So kids' toys is a perfect one. You'll make a sort of a prototype, and a kid will just look at it and make a completely different assumption to what us adults or us toy inventors or designers think it will be, and then you often learn from that moment. So this idea of learning from failure is a really key one.
A lot of times I'll take that early prototype, when I share it with someone, I'll say, a fellow designer of mine is working on this prototype, what do you think? That disarms the person. If I say I've just worked on this prototype, people are naturally like, they don't want to hurt your feelings, they're not going to give you really good feedback. So if I say it's someone else's, I'd love to get your feedback so I can go back and share. They're much more honest on that.
Yeah, that's a really great tip, Brendan, for like getting feedback, saying I didn't make this.
Yeah.
My team are not, we just really like your feedback. Feel free to just say what you think.
With kids, we give them little toy tester cards that say you're official toy tester. Yeah. And as a toy tester, we need you to be completely honest. Sometimes they're so brutally honest. It's painful, but it's good.
They're quite tough clients.
Yeah.
So you're saying we should show all of our prototypes to kids before we show them to
No, not necessarily. Hey, let's welcome Rick in Michigan. So that's where I grew up. So hi, Rick. Hope you're doing well. So let's see if we got another question coming up. Let's see.
So Nora is joining us from Madrid.
Yeah.
And she asks, have you used prototypes for communication campaigns or messages? That's a great question. I think everything we do is about communicating and messaging. And then I think this question really is relating to like building movements or sort of communicating.
Yeah, there's a lot of groups in our at IDEO are working on brands and actually working on messaging. You think of as traditional advertising, but with social media, it's way different. So all that can be prototyped. Definitely, if you're thinking of prototypes only a physical experience, a physical product or something, that's not true at all. You think about prototyping yourself. You wanted new ways to wake up in the morning, right? So that might be a physical alarm clock, or it might be, hiring a butler to come wake you up. That might be extreme, but there are all sorts of different ways. So definitely, we've used it for communication. We have quite a big communications team here, or interaction designers. Campaigns would be different. I don't know if we've done any. I don't think so.
Yeah, we did the I'm a Star campaign a while ago.
Yeah.
The I'm a Star was the campaign we did a while ago, and then I think Bedsider, which was all about it's basically being informed about your birth control options, was also a campaign that was prototyped iteratively through digital channels. And I know that a lot of our pharmaceutical work and some of our medical work, we've actually launched little pilots online to see how people respond to packaging design and brands before they've even become real prototypes.
Great question, Nora. If you're working on that area, we'd love to see where you're at. We can give you more direct feedback. So very cool.
But it's really exciting to be testing this sort of stuff, because you've got Facebook, social media channels, and you can actually sort of release little vignettes into the wild and actually see what people respond to that, and whether they even like it or acknowledge it or click on it. And that's actually sometimes a really good strategy for figuring out, is your communication message resonating with an audience or the type of audience you're looking to.
Or on YouTube or the video channels would be exciting.
Yeah. So do you want to just quickly remind people how to ask questions? Because there's
I'll let you do it this time.
So Brendan, this is really high tech. This is a prototype. So
it's definitely a prototype. It's definitely a prototype.
So there's these nine little dots. So you got to click on that, and it gets you to being able to ask questions to us, and you can send those in. And as you ask those questions, we really want to know where you're logging in from and asking those questions from.
Cool.
So what's our next questions coming in?
Well, Cam in Toronto is asking, what has been the most enlightening, eye-opening piece of feedback you received while prototyping? So
enlightening. That's
enlightening or inspirational. One thought comes to mind. I recall when we were prototyping, this has been a kids product, and we needed to get the mom's feedback on it. So we're very interested in asking moms. We didn't even want to ask kids about this because it needed to be mom approved. So we had the prototype there, and we're asking mom all these different questions. And her 7-year-old was behind the sofa. And after we got done with about 15 minutes of questions, the 7-year-old pops his head up, and she goes, "That's not true. Mom didn't give the true answers at all. This is what we do. This is what we actually do." And I don't think mom was lying. She was just trying to answer it how she wanted to be. Like, she wanted to
communicate a
certain message, and wasn't lying, but in her mind, that's kind of the way that she does things. But her 7-year-old was saying, well, here's what actually happens. Especially if you ask someone, like, what do you normally eat? They give you like this list of all healthy stuff. But if you say, what did you eat yesterday? You get a much different answer. So that was super enlightening. So now, lots of times when we're asking mom, we'll ask them, we'd love to have your kid around. It's sort of a truth checker.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that Brendan makes, is actually if you interview in pairs, especially when you're dealing with kids. They're often a little shy, and then if they have a friend there with them, their friend will either call them on the stuff that they're saying is true or false, or they'll actually help them come out of their shell. And I think that's the same with adults. When you go and interview, say, something as simple as a mobile phone, user interface, or a model, if there's a friendly banter between the friends, they'll often call each other, and that's actually the most revealing moment, and that's actually the enlightening moment for us as designers. Is actually what people say, think, feel, and do is so different depending on where you are, depending on the culture and the context. And people say things and often mean something else, and it's really good to have that one person.
Yeah, I think what's important there, if you go back to, even if you didn't take the first section, is to really withhold judgment of what you feel in trying to listen and look for these behaviors and to really feel what the person's trying to say. So the enlightening stuff is so good, but you get used to it, like feeling, oh, that's different. Why is that different? What's that mean to me? Welcome to Peter in San Francisco. 10-minute walk from our IDEO studio, so that's nice.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have a question.
Looks like we got Nindy from San Francisco as well. So people just joined. We've got a few people from San Francisco. So we're live from Palo Alto. Will Carey and Brendan Boyle from Toy Lab. And the next question from San Francisco is, how would you suggest we confine our final projects? Without a real client, it's easy to iterate to infinity. So I think this question is really looking at how do they find constraint. And again, I think they've got a week left. So perfect two constraints there is time, and then this idea of a client deadline when you don't have a client. How do we help our students out there?
Yeah, so a couple of suggestions there would be, without knowing your project, but I really think Will's answer is great. So think of it as you give yourself 1 extra week after the project or 2 extra weeks, but give yourself a time deadline. But then you have to understand what you want to get out of the project. If this is something you want to present to your own management, then get it ready and present that. Give yourself another time management. If this was just a learning experience, give yourself that time experience to try to wrap it up, and then try to do it again for another project of your own, or a project at what you're working on at work, or something personal. But decide what you want to get out of it, but make it a learning experience, or make it something you want to continue going forward with.
Yeah, I think finding that focus, like don't try and do everything. Again, Brendan saying, where do you want to show it, or what do you want to get out of it? Do you want to share it with friends? One thing I've really loved is that we often talk about the bar test of like that, or the elevator pitch. Like, how do you talk about what you're doing in 20 seconds, 1 minute? And that often helps you clarify what your focus is, because if you can't really say it in that time, maybe you just need to figure out what it is you're really focusing on. And then when you can, that kind of gives you that sort of focus and clarity as to what it is. And if you don't have a client, then you can also make that client aspirational, fictitious person that you would want to be presenting to up. There's nothing wrong with trying to constrain yourself by saying, well, if I was in this industry, this is how I present it, and this is how I present it to someone else. But just testing it out on your friends, if they can be your perfect.
Yeah, and I look back at some of the projects, because when I was studying design in university, I was so thinking this was going to be the one I'm going to make a company of and things like that. But in retrospect, if I'd looked at it, this is a great learning experience. How am I going to repeat this? And a lot about design thinking is, how are you going to repeat the process so you get better at it?
Yeah.
So
I think that was it. When I remember studying as a student, and it was always about wanting to work for the client, because everything we did was hypothetical and you felt like it wasn't as important. In actual fact, the great freedom you have when you don't have a client is actually sometimes overwhelming, but actually really, really important part of your learning journey. And if you just want to find that constraint because you want to make it feel more realistic, that's also fine. But just celebrate the fact you don't have a client. Sometimes it's a good freedom to have.
Karen in Argentina, welcome. Any extra suggestions on how to defer judgment?
Yeah, we're very judged these days. There's a lot of judgment going on.
My first thing that comes to mind is we are so good at making decisions, and that's this converging thinking. And there's a ton of successful people in this class, and they're good at converging, making decisions. You just don't get into kind of where you're at without basically our education system is teaching us how to make decisions, take tests, and all this kind of stuff. So when we come up with ideas, we want to converge on them so fast.
Yeah.
So you need to keep practicing on this divergent thinking.
Yeah.
And how many wild and ridiculous ideas, and I talk about that in the class, can you get? So just tell yourself, I'm going to try this divergent thinking for 5 minutes. You know, people think of brainstorms an hour or 2 hours. That's if you're not that good at that type of thinking, you're going to go nuts. So if you could say, in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to try to get 10 ideas and not judge them.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's just about framing it. Like, I love to tell my team, like, I've got a really silly idea. Don't take me too seriously. And that's almost asking for the permission to be having a deferment of judgment. And then when we've got a big group of people, we ask people, like, for this period of time, we're going to go for as many ideas as possible, defer judgment and go for quantity. And then after that, then that's when you can start to judge. And then you give people, you know, either a way to rank and rate the ideas.
For me, that's goes into the way we both are, and the firm is around this playful mindset. Yeah. So how do you know, when someone says you know, you act like a 10-year-old, that's a compliment for me. So it just reminds me that to be innovative, you have to be very comfortable. There's lots of ideas, and most of those are going to be ridiculous. And
there's deferring judgment, but you've got to have a curious mindset as well with that, right? We spend a lot of our time trying to be serious and sensible, but actually sometimes out of these playful, you know, judgment deference moments, you can really find something wild, and you go, well, whilst this sounds ludicrous, there is an element of this that's really interesting, and that's just that little seed of an idea that can push you into something completely new. So it's a really important thing, and I love the way that Brendan actually has taught us to do these things in front of clients, where you have like 20 executives, and they're very serious and very, you know, they're paying good money often to get a result. And we can take a room full of quite serious people and have them drawing faces or drawing each other's portrait within 20 seconds. And that simple sort of leveling exercise of asking you to draw your neighbor and then showing that picture often gets a laugh. But it's a really wonderful ice-breaking exercise. Yeah, so there's a big history to that story.
So a lot of it, going back to this divergent thing, is getting that playful mindset and a lot of warm-up activities. I think we talked about a couple in the class.
Yeah. So we've got Rick from Michigan. He's got a question for us.
Great. So any suggestions on how to deal with the situation when the target customer of the prototype can't see the possibility? E.g., you need an app to understand opportunities as opposed to an emulator on a PC.
That sounds like quite a specific need.
So if the target customer, it depends on what you're trying to test. If you're trying to test to validate this idea, or if you're trying to test the idea to learn from. So and lots of times, the target customer isn't the one you really want to test from. We love to talk about extreme users. So it's a person on the end who would never use your app or your prototype, or the other person who loves that and would buy everything in that category. So sometimes the target one can't tell you what they want. There's a famous quote by Henry Ford. If I asked the customer what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? Yeah. So you've heard that one. Yeah. But
I think that it's also about the reference point of the customer. Sometimes they might be completely happy with what they've got, or they just, again, you have to give them questions or exercise to help open up their mindset. And you could sort of ask questions like, in an ideal world, if there wasn't any constraint, like, could you imagine using this? Sort of non-leading questions, but just help sort of open up the dialogue. And then I love what Brendan said. It's like looking at the extremes. Often when you look at the exact customer, they're just going to tell you what they know. And actually going out of the industry or out of the core segment of who you're looking for can actually reveal more insights that then can surprise that customer and give them something that they really couldn't imagine.
It's a really good targeted question. If he's further downstream, maybe he's got to develop enough of a minimal viable product, and for those in the startup world, that's the MVP, enough to really work and actually be out there in the marketplace. And products in the marketplace, in effect, are prototypes. Because if there are any app developers out there, anytime you update, that's basically you're saying, I've updated my prototype.
Yep.
So good question. Let's jump to Natalia. And what's your question there?
Well, so Natalia, great question. Has it ever happened to you that the idea you prototype does not work at all, and you have to move in a different direction? I mean, I think this is really capturing the essence of what we're saying about prototyping. Prototyping is ultimately a way for you to iterate quickly, fail early, make quicker decisions.
Well, I think we referenced this in the class, but the airline seating of the bunk bed. Were you on that project?
No, I saw it. It was a really well-known case study.
Yeah, I mean, that, in case you're not familiar with that, why don't you tell us that one real quickly?
So it was an aircraft project, and we had to do the interior of the cabin, and they wanted to figure out how to sort of effectively give people space, but also pack as many people into the cabin as possible. And they looked at all different types of configuration, from like sleeping in bunk bed configuration, sleeping under the seats, sitting people like really close to each other. And I think the practicalities of the bunk bed was the sort of awkwardness of like.
But the team and both teams wanted to go forward with that. On paper, it seemed like a good idea.
And sketch storm, so they did body storming, which is they actually all acted this out in the space.
But the awkwardness of having someone right above you and put their foot down, perhaps on your bunk, and think of your boss right above you. Once that started to be prototyped, it was like, this is not working. In fact, it's creepy.
Yeah.
So
and it was really for the aircraft interior. It didn't work. I mean, it does work in some train cabins.
Yeah. But I mean, I can think in the toy world that happens most of the time. It doesn't work. We gotta go in a different direction. But
that's a great point. So it's like what you think is a good idea on paper, when you actually act it out, or body storm in this case, it reveals something new. And sometimes when you actually act it out, it bumps you onto a new insight.
The challenge for a designer is not to fall in love with that prototype. Because then you get, it's so hard, but you get defensive, like, oh, this person doesn't understand it, or they're an idiot. But in reality, you have to step back and look at why don't they get it, what's wrong, and then that's going to make your prototype better. But it's really challenging, especially when you believe this is the next great thing.
There are times when you feel like there's a bit of tacit knowledge there, and you have a bit of experience, and you kind of have to sometimes just look back and say, well, why is that not working? It's not because necessarily it's completely wrong, but there's these things that are being perceived to be wrong, and you can just iterate on that, which is also another way to pivot.
All right, a similar questions from Marcia and Natalia. As a facilitator, how do you encourage wilder ideas if your team is having a hard time getting there? And how do you ensure everyone is engaged? Maybe jump to everyone is engaged.
Yeah, I think the key is making sure everyone is engaged from the start, and really setting up the day and the context with a very clear agenda, and also not expecting people to be in a room for too long. So again, it's kind of like attention deficit disorder. People get tired quickly, so giving them real short bursts of energetic activity, reflection time, always having good food, good quality, humor and people in the room. And that can then help you as a facilitator have an easier job.
Yeah.
So you're not like sort of...
Totally agree. Totally agree. What I love to do is remind the group all these ideas, everything we're going to create today is because of the group.
Yeah.
So that builds everyone as a team versus I'm all individuals and I'm competing for myself. So reminding them as a facilitator, it's subtle cues in the room, someone's not talking, or they're just more of a quiet personality, but making sure as facilitator, you pull some answers out of that person so they feel engaged. And then one conversation at a time is so crucial, because sometimes folks get, someone's just got a more outgoing personality, and all of a sudden we're hearing from that person more and more. But you as a facilitator have to make sure you're pulling everything up.
And I love what you said about facilitating a group. Give everyone a chance to speak within the first 5 to 10 minutes. Because as soon as someone's participated, and that's as simple as introducing yourself by saying who you are. So like, I'm Will Carey, I'm one of the design directors here at IDEO, and I'm really happy to be with Brendan Boyle. Now I've participated, right? And I think as soon as you break down those simple tricks like that really help. And then that makes your job easier as a facilitator. And
then getting wilder ideas from the group. Yeah, this is one where it needs to be a safe environment. If the head boss is there and that person does not like wild ideas, it's not going to happen. But if you can set the stage, like, this is a safe place. And it's funny when clients come to IDEO and they think, oh, I can't say any ideas because they won't be as creative as you guys. What typically happens is someone says an idea that is totally ridiculous and that set the bar low. And then once the bar's set low, everyone goes, oh, that's easy. I can come up with an idea. That's stupid. Yeah. But that's, in reality, that just tells the team, they're coming up with a lot of ideas, right? We're not judging them yet.
Yeah.
So
it's always about,
set the bar low.
Yeah, and again, deferring judgment's a really important one, building the ideas of others.
Yeah, deferring judgment. You really, as a facilitator, need to run the rules. And it's just, in that case, it's one of the ideation techniques we use around brainstorming, but the rules have to be set.
So we've got a really exciting question from Kelly. Kelly's saying, can you give us some sort of suggestions for supplies to keep handy when prototyping? Tinfoil was helpful. Any others?
Well, first, Kelly, I love the question because as designers, you start thinking about what's in your toolbox and then adding to it. So you did the tinfoil hat and stuff. Man, I didn't know tinfoil could be such an easy prototype material. But we have this one amazing is Post-its, and I've seen people create prototypes out of Post-its.
I've seen people do the pyramid exercise as an icebreaker.
So, but yeah, it's fantastic.
You can build pretty complex structures out of
But yeah, if you're thinking low fidelity prototypes but high fidelity thinking, paper, tape, aluminum foil, then you get a little more sophisticated. You get into foam core or styrene or other materials. But think of things you can cut without using power tools first. And then you start going into deeper things. If it's digital or experiential design, they're super cool video editing apps, ones that we've worked on that help tell that story in a hurry.
It's amazing what you can do with paper, and that's paper design for a user interface or paper design by building something with structure and having some sort of simple variations like card, tape, glue, and we often use hot melt, which is that like really hot glue. And then when you want to elaborate, you can build in materials like balsa wood, foam core, and then if you have access to a shop, you can go and use power tools. But you don't really need to worry. It's just about the materials you have access to are the best ones you have, and you should just try and build with what you can there. And then obviously use a pen and paper to sketch your ideas as well. That's
fantastic. Cam has another great question from Toronto. Tell us an example of when an extreme / wild or ridiculous idea played out a major role in your final design.
I like that question. It's sort of like serendipity and surprise.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, that's really like the essence of building anything. It's like thinking with your hands is actually really important to everything you do. And we often overthink stuff. And when you just start building, you suddenly discover a new opportunity. And the material often gives you a direction because of what it is. If it's paper, if it's clay, if it's wood, if it's digital code, and it'll always give you an idea by playing with that material.
Right.
And I think the examples, I mean, tell you must be discovering that all the time with stuff you're doing.
Well, so the book that I did with John Cassidy, the Klutz book on inventions, that was a joke. Like, hey, we could do a book on the most ridiculous ideas. Yeah. And that actually turned into a very successful book. So that was a funny one. The one in the course where we talk about, Adam on my team talks about clip clops. And that was basically, so that was taking the idea of, if you think of a boy's toy of a car and seeing how fast it goes down the track, and everyone's trying to make a faster car go down the track. We thought about, wouldn't it be ridiculous if the car went super slow? Yeah. And that led us to, well, that would be a ridiculous idea. Like, who wants a slow car? Do you want to, so that led us to all this sort of new direction around this one. So this one, we saw that in the video. So, okay. Good question, Kim. All right, so.
Oh, we got someone, Miran from Israel. Welcome.
Oh, very cool.
We've really got coverage with nearly every continent now.
All right. I usually run into this when it's already done. So already done, already invented here. That's help. And then she's asking help.
People think, I mean, the idea of an idea being completely new is kind of rare. Everything's always a version or a build on something. I think the idea of this has already been done, but like it's the way you do it.
I get that. That's really good insight.
It's sort of like cooking in a way.
So
it's like how you cook the dish.
I get that all the time. So what you need to do is say, great, let me be clear and show you all the nuances of this idea. And hopefully there's something there that's a little bit different you can really build on. But lots of cases, I mean, there are a lot of good thinking out in the world. We're all seeing the same thing, so a lot of stuff happens. It may mean you have to force yourself to go into a little more risky an idea sometimes.
Yeah, or ask the clarifying question, what has been done? And then you can explain and clarify how the idea that you're showing could be similar or perceived to be similar and how this is an improvement. And this really gets at the idea of what are you trying to prototype? Are you trying to prototype something that's incremental, just a version of something, or are you trying to do something revolutionary and new?
Yeah.
And I think that's really sort of...
But it may be a chance for you to experiment with how you're presenting too.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a short video or something else that gets all your thinking across quickly, so they're not missing it. And sometimes folks I present to all the time say, oh yeah, we've worked on things with motors, and I'm going, yeah, but everyone's worked on things with motors. Here's the way this motor does this mechanism so much different.
Yeah, and if you're doing user interface design and it's something that's very similar to something you've done before, it's sometimes hard to find that new interaction or that new detail. But it's like someone's focusing in on just something very subtle and actually expressing that differently, like the way a transition works or the way the user sort of gets an element of surprise when they reveal a color behind a card as they slide it off the screen, the way it sort of animates. These are all like little details that actually can completely differentiate an experience, and it's a very nuanced thing. So whilst at a bigger picture it can just be seen like that's the same, I think there's a lot of little details that can really differentiate.
So, great question, and good luck on that. Let us know. Let's see.
So we've got a question from Ursula.
Do more insights lead to less failure in your experience, or is the insights process continually overlapping with other stages?
I think that's a great question. I'm a great believer in research throughout. Sort of this idea of just doing research at the beginning and being done and you get the insights. Yes, that's great. You're always like uncovering new insights as you build and you show people things. So I think it's either or, and it's great when you're sort of revealing new insights.
Yeah, it's a really deep question. For us, it's just so ingrained in our process because we want to uncover those insights because then it has a real need back to the user. So we're not just inventing stuff that we think is cool. So I think, yes, it will lead to less failures if you're shooting around, because without the insights, you're just going to be trying to come up with ideas that probably, based on your judgment, are going to be good. Yeah. So then we want to take those ideas and go back and check them against those insights.
Yeah, and it's nice to be consistent. So if you do come up with some insights and you sort of deliver on how those insights lead to a experience, a product, that's good. But you can also just be honest and say, like, we find some new insights.
All right,
one last question.
Last question for Peter. How do you get buy-in from traditional clients? So I think he means probably, traditional tough clients. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, traditional clients. I think it really depends on what your definition of traditional is. I mean, in very well-established industries, I think is a good way of thinking about it.
The way we do it, established industries, they need to play with us. Won't work with a client unless they're going to collaborate. They're going to send a team. They can work with his teams. Otherwise, they don't get it. They don't get the process. They don't get things. It's like, oh, how'd you get that, right? So if they're along, they're going to buy in. But getting them their time to do that is challenging.
Yeah, and I think actually having credibility in the room is really important. So being able to meet them at the level of what they're doing. So whether that's in automotive, in consumer electronics, in food, you name it, that there can obviously be a traditional aspect to any industry, but there's always a way to sort of kind of like bump people out of that sort of expectation.
Sometimes clients
into a new space of imagination.
And it's not guaranteed. Sometimes they just don't get it.
Yeah. So the other thing is like a personal rapport, like just getting a rapport with people is really important.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, the analytical thing is, so like I think the question here is he's sort of saying, well, traditional clients, they're very analytical and probably means that they want to see data and metrics. And we always believe in taking that balance between having data and metrics married with qualitative user human-centered insights. So I think that's being able to explain that and get confidence. And
so good. Hey, so everyone, thanks. We're so glad you could join us. Keep tweeting your learnings and insights. This is office hours going to be a recording, so we can post that up. Remember, final assignment due by August 24th, so good luck with that. Yeah. We're super excited to hear what you guys are working on and see further along.
It's got one more week.
Yeah,
it's really exciting. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Had a really good time speaking to you all, and yeah, good luck with your projects.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having us, Brendan.
Thanks, Will.